Hello, and welcome to another Silver Screen Filmmakers Club workshop. We are glad you are joining us today. The information provided to you today is brought to you by the Stage Incubator, along with our sponsor, the Indiana Arts Commission. This is also brought to you in partnership with the Center for Urban and Regional Excellence at Indiana University Northwest and Folk Art, the Volunteers Office for Community Accessibility Resources and Training. All right. Well, welcome back. Hopefully, Module 1 and Module 2 didn't get you discouraged. We want you to be excited about what you're about to create. This is an amazing task that you have in front of you, and you all have been doing wonderful so far. But are you ready to jump back in and start learning about our next subject? Well, if so, welcome back, the Silver Screen Filmmakers Club. All right, well, let's jump right on in. This is Module 3, and I just want to welcome you. Today, we are going to delve into the fascinating world of typography. And Module 3 is all about typography, text design, and theme, and what it means in your journey as you learn about graphic design and how to create your movie poster. So, again, just with some brief formalities, I'm your instructor, I'm your facilitator here. My name is Gretchen Sipp, and I have many, many years of teaching and training experience. My background definitely is graphic design. I also have a background in business and marketing and a plethora of things. My experience is quite vast, but I love, love, love graphic design and essentially being able to communicate with others beyond using my my audible words and actually using visuals to create impactful messages. So I'm excited about what we're going to learn this week. So, the week 3 agenda, we'll talk more about this as we go, but this agenda is all about your introduction to typography. Typography is a vast subject, and you really could study typography for at least a good 6 months, let alone when you get into the nitty gritty details of it. There are a lot of platforms that you can actually create your own typefaces and fonts, but that is a lot of detail and a lot of work. For this module, we're just going to do high level overview just to get your sort of toes wet in what is typography, so at least you understand the terms and how it applies to graphic design. Then we're going to go into typography essentials, where we'll talk about just some of the essential elements when it comes to typography. And then we're going to talk briefly about the demonstration for typography and poster design. There will be another video. In fact, in our office hours, we are actually going to do a live demo of the demonstration. And then, of course, for this week, your assignment is to design a poster utilizing typography. So, our lesson outline for this week: typography, text design, and theme. Again, we're just doing a brief overview for what is typography, brief intro. Next, we're going to go into the principles of typography and poster design. And then lastly, talk a little bit about the relationship between typography and theme, and how these things they go hand in hand when you're actually thinking about your design for graphic design or for your poster. All right. So, intro to typography. We're going to talk very briefly here about what is the definition, number one, and next, what is the importance of typography in actual design. So, let's begin with a fundamental question: what is typography? What in the world is it? Well, typography is the art and technique of arranging type to make written language not only legible and readable, but also visually appealing when it's displayed. It's a crucial element in graphic design, influencing how text is perceived and interpreted. So it is an artwork. Is it art? Sorry, it is definitely an art form to utilizing typography and understanding what role it plays in graphic design, and it's really key to understanding that typography deals with balance. And that's sort of what I want you to think about as we go. Now, there are going to be some keywords that I use all the time in this lesson, and I hope you don't get tired of them. But one of them is going to be readability. So just get used to that. If you can say that 15 times fast, you're a pro. All right, let's go on. So, the importance of typography in design. Well, typography plays a vital role in graphic design for several reasons. Firstly, it enhances readability, ensuring that the text is easy to read. Secondly, it conveys mood and tone, setting the emotional atmosphere of the design. Next, typography establishes hierarchy, guiding the reader through the content in a structured way, top to bottom, left to right. Additionally, it strengthens brand identity by using consistent typefaces that reflect the brand's personality. You can see this with very popular brands that we see from day to day, from whether you go to a certain store, those that, go to Walmart versus Target versus Meyer, the branding without even having to think about it. If I put up a red circle, a large red circle, and then have a smaller circle in the middle, and that central circle, I'm talking about Target. Versus if I have a yellow star, I'm talking about Walmart, or a white star, I'm talking about Walmart. So typography strengthens brand identity because it uses consistent typefaces, the same fonts across their products. Lastly, it guides the reader's eye, helping them to navigate the design effectively. So, typography essentials overview. First we're going to talk about the definition and importance. That's understanding what typography is and its significance in graphic design. Then we're going to go into the anatomy of type. Now, when we're talking about anatomy of type, we're talking about learning the key elements or the key components of typefaces, such as, baseline, ascender, descender, cap height, X height, and serif. Now, I know those terms may sound very foreign to you, but we're going to dive into those terms just a little bit, not too detailed. I don't want to scare you off, but we're just going to talk about those a little bit. Next, typeface and font selection. Choosing the appropriate typefaces and fonts for different design contexts based on purpose, audience, tone, and readability. For example, if you have a movie, say for instance, even think about what's the most one of the most recent ones, Bad Boys 2. Even when you see the poster and the fonts that they use for that, it's not the same font as maybe think about Harry Potter, or think about Star Wars. Those are separate and different types of fonts. Even think about the Minions. You have the movie out now called Despicable Me, right? And that's, really targeted towards children and towards families. That font type is way different than, if we're talking about a Harry Potter movie, or if we're talking about Alien 2, or if we're talking about Star Wars. The fonts set the mood, and they're all based off of the audience that they're trying to reach. Then we have font pairing, and that's all about combining multiple typefaces effectively to enhance the visual appeal and readability of the design. Again, that word, readability, is all key. And then readability and hierarchy, ensuring that the text is easily readable and establishing a clear hierarchy to guide the reader's eye through the content. Our role as graphic designers, or, as you're creating your poster, is to utilize visuals and utilize text and do it in such a way by formatting, by layout, by composition, doing it in such a way that you help the reader know what's important information and what information they need to know. And you do it utilizing elements such as typography. So let's jump into the anatomy of type. To effectively use typography, you have to understand the anatomy of type and what it all entails. And some of the key components include the baseline, the ascender, the descender, cap height, X height, and serif. Now, we'll talk a little bit more here in this next slide so that you can understand what those actually are. So here I have this, nifty little diagram that breaks down these items. Now we're going to start from the left and we're going to move over to the right. The first thing first, when you look at this, does this look sort of familiar to you? I know, it's just the word typography on a line, but if you can dig back into your memory way back, way back, way back, even into elementary school, where you were learning how to print your name, write the alphabet. Do you remember that? Well, think about the teacher used to give you this lined paper, and it had these lines and it was solid lines at the top and the bottom, and then the dotted lines or the dashed lines in the middle. And you had to, when you wrote your name, you started off with a capital letter, and that had to go from the top line to the bottom line. Well, that top line is called the cap line. And that cap line, that's the line that marks the upper boundaries of capital letters, as well as that of some lowercase letters that have what we call ascenders. And we'll talk about that in a second. So, cap line, that's the top line, top of that line, right? And then you have the baseline. Now, the baseline is sort of that imaginary line on which letters and other characters rest on. Now, for me, my baseline, it's supposed to be straight, but sometimes it goes to a slant. I have a hard time when I'm writing on, chalkboards, whiteboards, on staying on a straight line. Essentially, it's supposed to be a straight line, right? But you have this imaginary bottom line here where the characters rest, right? Now, think about that dash line. That dash line sits in the middle. The dash line, that space from the dash line all the way down to that baseline, that's what we call X height. And X height is the height of a typeface's lowercase letters. Now, this excludes ascenders and descenders. Now, when I talk about ascender, as you see here, the ascender, we have pointed out the H, right? The ascender is the part of the letter, usually lowercase, that goes above the X height. So H has that element that goes above that X height, the dash line. Another letter like that is a T. Another letter like that is a L. They have these ascenders that go up. Then you have descenders. Now, descenders are, I like to say, it's the letters that like to, have something hanging, right? They got tails on them. Those are your Y's, your P's, your G's. They have those pieces that go below the baseline and hang out, right? Got a little tail on them. So we talked about cap line, baseline, X height. We talked about ascender. We talked about a descender. Let's talk about a little bit about kerning. Now, kerning is the horizontal space between two consecutive letters or characters. It is important when you're designing that when you're looking at your words and your fonts, your kerning is set correctly. Too much space there can make things look awkward. And if you have way too much space, Instead of you having one word, it can look like you have multiple words that make no sense, and that affects the readability. So we have that, and we also have characters. Now, I have the character here pointed out to the O, but a character really is any individual symbol that is a part of a set that forms a typeface. It includes letters, numbers, or even punctuation marks. All right, so we have quite a bit of information here. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about serifs, but just to give you a heads up, this here, the word typography, I used a sans serif font, and so we'll talk about what this is. But serifs are fonts that do not have these sans serif fonts do not have the sort of, I call them the feet and the little decorative hang-offs off of each letter. Those are sans serifs. Sans means without. But serifs are the small lines attached to the end of strokes in some fonts like this. And they play a role in the overall look and feel of the text. So let's go into some essentials really quick so that we can talk about what these do. Now, typography essentials, they encompass the fundamental aspects of typography that every designer should understand and apply to create effective and visually appealing designs. Now, these include the understanding of typefaces and fonts, the understanding of serif versus sans serif, font weight and style, hierarchy, alignment, spacing, and color contrast. This is all a part of a bigger picture, which is realizing the importance of readability in text. Let's jump in and take a look at font and typefaces. So, a typeface and a font. A lot of times people use those terms interchangeably, but they're actually two, different things. They're similar but different, right? So, the typeface is a family of fonts, right? You think about a family. You have, your mother, your brother, you got grandma or abuelita. You have all of the pieces of the family. You got your cousins, you got the nephew. You have all the pieces of the family, right? So the typeface is the family of fonts, while a font is a specific style within that family. Typeface with the specific design of letters, while font is a style. So font shape, describes it as this: a font is what you use, and a type is what you see. So choosing the right typeface and font involves several considerations. Firstly, you want to think about the purpose of your design. Is it formal? Is it casual? Is it playful? Next, you want to think about your audience. Who will be reading your text? Will these be children? Will these be teens? Will these be, you know, old, elder individuals? Will these people have, visual impairments? Those things of that nature. You want to think about who will be reading the text. Next, the tone. What mood do you want to convey? Do you want people to get ready for the fright of their life? I think about, books and movies like Twilight, or even, Nightmare Before Christmas or Beetlejuice. Those type of movies use a certain specific font because they're trying to get you anticipating possibly a scary situation. Versus if you have, trying to think of a fun movie. Pippi Longstocking, or even a Disney movie. For example, you have Aladdin. Think of those various genres of movies and the fonts that they use on those movie posters, movie covers, things of that nature. They all convey a certain mood. Lastly, readability. Is the text easy to read at different sizes? So you want to be careful of what type of text you use, because if it's not readable at certain sizes, then maybe we need to reconsider what we're using here. Now, I talked a little bit about it in our last slide when we talked about serif fonts. So, serif, again, is a short line found at the ends of a letter form. Now, these are often decorative in function and give fonts a traditional look. Serif is also used to refer to the category of typefaces with this kind of characteristic. Classic serif font, everybody knows, is Times New Roman. You also have fonts like Courier. Trying to think of some more fonts that sort of hold this. Bodine, Bodini, Botany. Just those typical, sort of older traditional fonts have, they're usually fall in that serif family. Then you have those that are sans serif, and sans, like I said, means without. You could be sans serif. Now, this is a typeface or category of typefaces without the serif, without the decorative elements. Now, the serif fonts have more of a traditional, distinctive, even, some would say elegant, but formal look to them. While the sans serif more is a modern, minimalistic look, you know? So you want to think about those considerations when you're choosing your typefaces. Now, font weight is the thickness of a font stroke, while font style can include regular, italic, oblique, which sometimes we call that bold, and small caps. Designers use font weight and style to create contrast and emphasis and even hierarchy in their designs. So think about even with this slide here. You know what my header is because I made sure that the font weight was thicker than the context of the body text on the right hand side, where it talks about font weight is the thickness of a font stroke. So, dealing with font weight and style, that can dramatically affect readability and emphasis. Bolder fonts can draw more attention, while lighter ones are used for body text. Not to say that the information is not as important, but just that we know that bolder fonts that have a heavier weight draw the attention of the reader first. Again, using this term over and over and over again. Readability is crucial in typography. You want to make sure that you ensure that your text is easy to read by choosing clear, legible fonts and appropriate sizes. Part of it is that it establishes hierarchy, which helps to guide the reader through the content, helping them understand the structure and the flow of information. So when you use different font sizes and you do different font weights and styles to create that visual hierarchy, that helps to direct the reader's eye. Hierarchy itself helps to guide the reader's eye to what's most important, using different font sizes and weights to create a clear visual hierarchy. As we see in our example here, the heading, that's the most important information. Usually is placed around the top of the document. And that means, or even in that placement, is likely to attract the viewer. Then we have the subheading. Now, that sort of helps to divide up your design layout into different sections to give the reader more information. And then lastly, we have the body of the document, that text body. And that section usually includes more content. Sometimes we want to be careful when we put a lot of content on a document that we don't make it too heavy. But if you choose a font that's appropriate, as well as a font style that's appropriate, it makes it less heavy to read, if that makes sense. All right, so let's jump into some of our other elements. We have alignment. Alignment is a crucial aspect of typography that affects the readability, aesthetics, and overall design of the text. It can make you look more organized and more professional. You want to choose the alignment that best suits your design. So let's talk about a few of the common alignment options. We have left align, right align, center alignment, justified alignment. Now, with left alignment, that means it's flush left, right? Flush left and what we call ragged right. So that means flush left, square up against it, solid straight line, even, clean cut. Ragged right. I call it raggedy right. Ragged right, which means that your right side is not necessarily flush. It can stop, your sentences can stop anywhere, sometimes making a little zigzag. So it's not as flush. I'm not a seamstress, but I have, cut up. I used to, how back in the day you would, cut up your shirt or, cut the collar off your shirt to make it a different design. And sometimes when you're using the wrong kind of shears or scissors, that cut can be ragged, right? So that means it's not a straight line, it's not smooth, it's a ragged cut. Think about that when you're thinking about ragged right, but it's a left alignment. So left alignment is flush, it's straight line. That means that that right side is a little bit more ragged. Now that alignment is commonly used for body text in books, articles, and reports. Now, this is the preferred sort of alignment or style for readability, especially when it comes to long paragraphs. Okay. Now you have right alignment, which means flush right. So that says straight, smooth on the right, ragged left. Now this is not really a lot of times used for professional writing or things of that nature. It's often used for captions and sidebars and really for decorative purposes. Now, you want to be careful when you use that, making sure that it's suitable for aligning the text to the edge of a design element, right? But you want to be careful when you use that, but it's still, you know, sometimes when you have, a little caption or note in a document, you can put it on the right and make it right align and it fits right in. Then you have center alignment. Now, center alignment is used a lot. Commonly, though, it's used for titles, headings, and even short lines of text. Now, this is suitable for invitations, posters, and other designs where symmetry is desired. So, where you want things to be symmetrical and sort of in a way balanced, you use center alignment. Next, you have justified alignment, and this is commonly used in newspapers and magazines and books. Now, justified is when it is even on both sides. So, no ragged edges, justified almost like a block. But what it does, if you can see even in this example, it puts uneven spacing. And that's when you have to mess with kerning with your letters and things of that nature. Also, you can work with tracking, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But that's more suitable again for creating a formal, structured look. Now we have proper spacing. Spacing is important. Spacing includes kerning, leading, tracking, and line length, and is crucial for readability and overall appearance. Proper spacing makes your text easy to read, but also aesthetically pleasing. So you want to make sure that you get your spacing right, right? So kerning is the adjustment of space between individual letters in a font to achieve visually consistent spacing. Now, the importance of this is that it improves readability and enhances visual appeal while making sure or ensuring even spacing between those letters. You want to make sure that as you're working through kerning, you're utilizing it, that you keep the space, pretty even and making sure that that space is consistent. Next, we have tracking. Now, this is with letter spacing again, but tracking is the overall spacing between characters in a block of text. So, we're talking about a block of text affecting the density and readability of that text. The importance of making sure that your tracking is on key is it controls the overall appearance and readability of text and adjusts the feel of the text, whether it's tight. So tracking makes you can make it tight where the letters are right next to each other, or loose where there's more space in the letters. When you make sure that your tracking is well planned and well executed, it helps to maintain visual consistency in larger text box. Now, in our example here, we talk about tracking and typography for that first line, individual letters, the spaces in individual letters, but for the whole phrase, that whole text block. Kerning and typography, as you see, if you mess that kerning up in between the letters themselves, it can make where you have this one block of text where it's supposed to be kerning and typography. Now it looks like kerning in typography. So it looks like a whole different type of phrase here. That's the importance of kerning and tracking. You want to make sure that you are using your best eye to ensure that readers are getting the accurate message from the text that you're using. Now we have leading. Now, leading is dealing with line spacing. So before we were talking about character spacing, now we're talking about line spacing. So leading is the vertical space between lines of text measured from baseline to baseline, right? And we know the baseline is that imaginary line where the characters sit, right? So baseline to baseline in between lines of text. Now, the importance of this is that it affects readability and comfort. It also creates visual hierarchy and balances the text block visual. So, if you have if your leading is very minimal between lines, and you have words that have what we call descenders, like a Q has that tail that hangs under it, the Y has the tail that hangs over it under it, and it falls into that space above the next line, it can affect the readability of the text, making it look, confusing the reader, and they have to work too hard to be able to interpret what you put in there in the document. While if you have adequate spacing, it's clear, it's concise, and it adds balance. And then leading. Now, leading or when we're talking about leading and we're talking about line length, line length is the measure of the horizontal width of a block of text, often measured in characters per line. So, the importance of this is that it impacts readability and comfort and prevents the reader from having fatigue, maintaining the balance of the text block. All right, let's jump into colors and contrast. So, color and contrast can enhance your typography by making it stand out and easier to read. You want to use color to create emphasis and visual interest. So, think about how you want to enhance the mood of something, or create emphasis around something, or if you want to actually just create some, break up the monotony, you can use color and contrast in your design. So, color and contrast can enhance your typography by making it stand out, right? And easier to read. When you use color, it does a number of things in helping to create emphasis and visual interest. When you use color in typography, number one, it sets the mood and the tone of the design. Two, enhances the visual appeal. Next, it helps to convey the brand's identity. And lastly, it can guide the viewer's attention. Now, one of the key things you want to remember when you're using color in typography, consistency is key. Consistency is key. You want to use a consistent color scheme that aligns with the overall design and brand identity of whatever you're working with, right? And then you want to make sure that the colors you're using actually assist in readability, ensuring that there's sufficient contrast between text and background colors to enhance readability. When you're using color to create, say, a visual hierarchy, as you see here on my slide, when I have, my top little sort of page title, color and contrast, it is white text on a blue background. But then on my actual slide, my heading says color and typography. It's blue on a light background, and my text is black on a white background. So you want to make sure that you utilize colors in your typography to help with things such as, hierarchy, headings, subheadings, things of that nature. Even call to actions, like when you say, please call now, things of that nature, or book us today. So, one of the things we'll sort of get into in our next lesson is about psychology of color. But I want to just, whet your palate here. With the psychology of color, think about the psychology of color and the impact that psychologically colors make on us. For example, blue is one of those colors. When you think about it, blue has been traditionally used, number one, for the government, but number two, for, federal and government institutions. And part of that is because blue conveys trust and professionalism. While on the other hand, you notice most or a number of different food, especially fast food places or even grocery stores, utilize the red color. Red can invoke excitement and urgency. So you want to make sure you think about what colors you're using and how you want them to help you in conveying your message. So let's talk about some best practices. Again, consistency. You want to use a consistent color scheme that aligns with the overall design, okay? Next, readability. Ensuring that sufficient contrast between text and background colors will enhance the readability. Hierarchy. You can definitely use color to create a visual hierarchy, making sure that you highlight important text such as elements, utilizing your headings, your subheadings, and just like I mentioned before, your call to actions. And then you want to make sure that when you're dealing with the psychology of color, your primary text, if it's your primary text, you want to use a dark color for on top of a light background, and even your body text. If you have a light background, use a darker color. Okay. And when you use accent colors, one of the things I always tell people is you can use brighter colors, just use them sparingly. Making sure that you use them for important information to draw the reader's attention. Okay. Next, let's talk about contrast in typography. So, contrast in typography, number one, it improves readability. Two, distinguishes between different text elements. And next, it helps, again, enhance the visual hierarchy, helping with preventing eye strain, to be frank. So, you want to make sure that there's a high contrast between the text and the background to make sure the text is easily readable. When you're dealing with high contrast, you want to make sure that, again, if you have black text, put it on a white background. Use white text, put it on a dark background. You want to make sure that the contrast ratios are right. And part of this, I talk about ADA accessibility all the time, but this is one of those key elements to making sure that something is ADA compliant. Next, text and background. So you want to avoid using colors that are too similar for text and background, as this reduces readability. So you wouldn't put, unless you can do it quite, do it right, you wouldn't put a dark blue and, say you have a royal blue and then you have a navy blue. You wouldn't put those together because that would clash and you wouldn't be able to read them. Next, layer text. And I'm going to show you an example of layer text. When you place text over images, ensure that the text has a contrasting background. So if you're using overlays, things of that nature, you want to make sure that that contrast is white. Right. So black on white is high contrast and very readable. But dark gray on a light gray, that's a lower contrast. Not wrong, just a lower contrast. Again, white on blue, like how we have here, white on dark, we have dark blue on a white. High contrast, very readable. So think about those things as you go through your design methods. Now, here are some tips in using typography. Number one, limit the number of typefaces used. We talk about the rule of thirds in our design principles, where we have you think about your document and you split it up in thirds, right? I take that same sort of rule of thumb when it comes to my typefaces. No more than three. Now on the left hand side, you see the word railway, right? And I have railway three times. Railway is the typeface. That's the family. So we're talking about the family typeface of railway. But then we have railway bold, we got regular railway, and then we have railway thin. Think about that's the father, that's the mother, that's the father, and then that's, the nephew. Okay, so they're related, different styles, same family. You want to use that same font family. Using the same font family creates harmony and visual coherence. And then, using fonts, they you want to think about how they can help set the mood. You want to match the typeface with your content. So if you're wanting a light and friendly feel, you'll probably go with soft rounding or rounded fonts. While if you want something more serious or straightforward, then you would go with a sans serif font that has solid and straight edges. Sometimes serif fonts can show elegance, and script fonts are a great way for displaying that elegance. Think about a wedding invitation. Think about, the font they use if, you get a ticket in the mail. So things of that nature. The fonts all convey a message, and sometimes it can induce anxiety, truth be told. All right, so let's look at a few examples before we wrap up this lesson. I chose just a few visual examples to get you, thinking about what is good design when it comes to typography and what is bad design. So, some good typography we have here on our left, you can clearly see again, black background, white text. So that's high contrast, number one. Number two, it's clear. You can clearly see it. Don't agree with yourself all the time, right? You can clearly see that. Concise message. Even though it's all caps, concise message. Now, there's no spacing between those lines, right? So you're leading and you're tracking, no spacing in between, but because there's no descenders, everything is going butt up against the baseline, you can still read it. While on the other side, can you tell me what that even says? That's a book cover. I have no idea. I've been trying to figure out. I think it says oxygen. I don't know. You see how when you choose bad typography or bad fonts and you stretch them and things to make them, of course, you're being creative, but your reader has no idea what it's supposed to mean. and we want to make sure that things are readable. Let's go to the next one. So on the left, we have a flyer for a job expo. How do I know it's a job expo? Number one, they chose a font that, while it sans serif, so that means it has no decorative tails. It is big block letters. It has a heavy weight on it, so I know that's the heading. It is a job expo. Then I have some subheading information. That's where they put the time and the date. And they laid out a visual hierarchy for the information that I need to know. And then they have body text down there. Now, what I need to know is when it is and where it is and what time, right? And that they have job opportunities available. So with that example, I clearly understand what that flyer is about. But on the right hand side, we have this flyer. Now they use color, right? So they have do in green, but the N apostrophe T is in white. And then they have DIE in red, but the R and the V are smaller letters and they're in white. So my eye first goes to the do and the die part. Why do I want to do die safely? What? Is that what they're trying to convey? Or are they saying don't drive safely? Or do drive safely? What are we supposed to do? Message is confusing based off of number one, the colors that they chose to use for the emphasis, the font sizes, the font weights. Very confusing message there. And lastly, let's check out this one here. We have a ad for, I want to say this is a Nike shoe. And we know bounce for days. We can clearly see that. We know it's a Nike shoe because of the images that it's helping there. But also it's clear the contrast is great. It shows movement. But then our flyer on the right hand side, using two colors while they're not the same, at the same time, they're right over top of each other. The layering. And so you have to look at it and really try to decipher, okay, this is good, bad, right, wrong. Okay, this must be opposites. Okay, what else is it trying to tell me? But the clash, if you were to have a visual impairment, whether you were colorblind, you wouldn't be able to read that. So you want to think about what your reader needs. So great job going through those examples. In summary, typography is a powerful tool in graphic design that enhances readability, it conveys mood, it establishes hierarchy, and it strengthens brand identity. You want to understand the anatomy of type, selecting the right fonts, right, and pairing them effectively. These are essential, okay? Very essential for anybody designing anything. So, what I want to do is encourage you to practice and experiment with different typefaces and combinations to find out what works best for you and for your projects. I really appreciate you taking time with me and joining me today. Now, as we continue to go on, I want you to think about number one, how does typography affect visual communication? How does it affect visual communication? Why is this so important? And then I want you to begin thinking about how you can incorporate these principles into your own design for your movie poster. So, we have our exercise up for our module for this week, for module 3. You can go on and jump into Moodle, use our URL, our address, log in, and navigate to the course section. Now, again, we are doing office hours, and those office hours will be recorded. So you should be able to see a link to that recording inside of Module 3 under that office hours area. It should be a link right there. I will send out a formal email with instructions on how to get to the recording, but you could check out in that recording. Number one, we cover this lesson, so you get to see it hands on. But not only that, we walk through a hands on demonstration of how to do the exercise for this week. So you really want to check out that recording. That's where we demonstrate it. And then we're also going to have Q&A. So if there's some other questions maybe that you thought of but you weren't able to join us, or you aren't able to join us for our live office hours, you can look at the recording and see if some of the questions there are answered for you. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Again, look out for that office hours. That's where we're going to do the typography and design demonstration. If you don't get to catch it live, you will be able to see the recording so you can catch up. Again, if you have any questions, either join us for the office hours, or you can always email us. And if we can't answer them via email, we will set up a Zoom call with you and hopefully be able to get your questions answered. Thank you again for attending, and we want you to make sure that you stay tuned, check out our recording, and make sure that you log into Moodle to upload your exercise. Thank you again for joining us, and we hope you have a good one. Well, I hope you learned a lot. Thank you for joining the Stage Incubator and viewing a part of our digital literacy series. We really appreciate you being here, and thank you for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us at thestageincubator@gmail.com. And don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Again, we want to thank our sponsors and our partners: the Indiana Arts Commission, the Center for Urban and Regional Excellence, and VOCART, the Volunteers Office for Community Accessibility, Resource, and Training. We hope to see you at our next session, and stay tuned for more things to come.